Well, welcome to the podcast, Ben. Thank you so much for joining me. Been a longtime fan of everything that you and the Solana team have been doing. Obviously, I've been following your career for quite some time, even kind of your early multi-coin days. So appreciate you coming on the podcast and chatting.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Logan. It's exciting to finally be here.
Long time in the works, but maybe one place to start. I feel like you do a lot for the Solana team, the Solana network, Solana Foundation, but you're a little bit behind the scenes. So I would love to give people a little bit more of context of who you are and what you do at Solana. And then maybe after that, jump into how you even got into crypto. I think everybody's background is a little bit unique in that front as well.
Sure. So my role at the Solana Foundation is head of strategic business development. I focus pretty broadly on the Solana ecosystem, both ecosystem team facing, that's like grassroots developers, and also people who are looking to integrate with the Solana blockchain in some capacity, whether it's like large Web2 or Fortune 500 companies that are looking to do some sort of deployment or utilize Solana Pay or something like that. We'll talk to them externally facing, help them go end to end on their integration. But at the same time, a lot of my day to day is talking with ecosystem projects, brainstorming, troubleshooting with them, and trying to improve the general developer experience so that they can be successful in what projects they're trying to build.
Perfect. And maybe we're definitely going to dive into all that a little bit later, but how'd you fall down the crypto rabbit hole? What got you started into blockchain?
Yeah, so interesting story. The first time I ever heard about Bitcoin was I was at the SALT conference in Las Vegas, and I was there by happenstance. My dad happened to be an extra on the set of the Wall Street 2 movie with Michael Douglas, and Anthony Scaramucci was also an extra on the movie. And they like kind of hit it off, and my dad followed up with Anthony afterward and like saw that he had this conference, and we ended up going out there. Long story short, we're at the conference and I'm kind of bouncing around. I'm a junior in college at the time. I don't really know anything about hedge funds, finance, or anything like that. And I stumble into this room about like Bitcoin and blockchain was the talk. And it was the Winklevoss twins, who I'd known from the Social Network movie about Facebook, and Valerie Vavilov, who was the CEO, might still be, of Bitfury. So I listened to their talk and I was like pretty interested in what they were talking about. And later that night, I went up to the Winklevoss twins at like the mixer that we were at, and they were more than happy to like answer my very rudimentary questions about Bitcoin. And that kind of like kicked me down the path. So I just went on and did my own researching for about the next year. I graduated college shortly after that. And I got to a point where I was working this non-crypto job, like my first job out of school. And I was spending probably most of my workday, all of my time after work, and then on the weekends, just researching crypto, connecting with people on Twitter, and doing anything that I could. And I got to this point where I was just like, I just need to quit my job and figure out how I can make this work. So I quit my job without anything like lined up, and I utilized my very small crypto network at the time to get a contractor job at Consensus. I was working specifically with Kevin Owocki and the Gitcoin team, who runs like a Ethereum bounties platform. And so I was just doing like social media marketing and like writing blog posts for them and interviewing users of the platform so we could like evangelize why Gitcoin was good for like the Web3 ecosystem. And I kind of just like rolled that into the rest of my career.
Nice. Amazing. No, I've always appreciative of especially kind of people in the ecosystem, such as the Winklevoss twins that have been around and will be able to, or that they're open enough to conversate about even like the basics still. And so it's very cool that you got that opportunity.
Yeah, they were so nice. When I say my questions were rudimentary, they were like very rudimentary, to the point where I was like interested enough where I was like, wow, like they took 10 minutes out of their day here when I'm sure they're being swamped by everyone else to answer my very rudimentary questions about what Bitcoin is. And that really like kicked me down that path. And it dovetailed like really well with like a personal fascination of mine as I was like growing up. Was I was in middle school going into high school when the great financial crisis happened. And I saw like how that affected like a lot of people in my like hometown and my friends' families and things like that. And as I got older and I learned about like the gross incentive misalignment that happened in the financial crisis that led to the huge blow up. Once I learned about Bitcoin and like honestly the concept of Nash equilibrium, where like any deviation from the rules just results in a loss for that user, I was immediately hooked, because I was like, oh my God, if we have like a Nash equilibrium system of finance, then like nothing like the great financial crisis can ever happen again. And that was like my immediate fascination that kind of just like kicked me down the rabbit hole.
That's amazing. So ultimately you kind of had a circuitous route, but how did you ultimately end up working at the Solana Foundation and end up in your current role?
Yeah, so shortly after Consensus, I worked briefly at a company in New York called Republic that had equity and token crowdfunding platform. All the while, I was really interested in getting into the investing side of crypto because I realized how early it was, and I didn't really want to dive into a project at the time and have that project just like die a year later because it didn't have product market fit or the tech wasn't like quite there. So I really got like captivated by Kyle and Tushar's blogs on the Multicoin website. And I actually applied 3 times before I actually got an interview with Kyle and Tushar. And I got that job at Multicoin at the end of 2018. So I was there for a couple of years working on the investment team. And after 2 years of working at Multicoin, I was really looking to like get back to the project side. I really liked like getting my hands dirty and like working closely with like projects and building like a protocol rather than investing at the higher level. So after a little while, I talked to Kyle and Tushar and I was like, hey, I want to get back to the project side. Do you guys have any like recommendations? And they really wanted to like keep me in like the Multicoin sphere, see where I could be providing value to our portfolio. So I talked to 3 of our portfolio companies at the time. I talked to Binance, a company called LivePeer, which is a decentralized transcoding network on Ethereum, and Solana. And a lot of people don't know this, but when I left Multicoin, I actually went to LivePeer for about a month. I was on the LivePeer team, basically doing the same thing. I was head of strategy at LivePeer, and I was there for about a month, and the product is fantastic, still is fantastic today, and the team is awesome. Like the use case, video transcoding, just like really didn't light me on fire, and I didn't really realize that until I was like in it for a little bit. Lucky for me, Raj was in my DMs every single day. Like, hey, like, how's the new job going? If you don't like the new job, you can come over here. You should, we're trying to build a DeFi ecosystem. You should, and, majority of my time at Multicoin, I spent focused on the Ethereum DeFi ecosystem. So that was really something that was like, intellectually stimulating for me. So once I came to the realization that my stint at LivePeer was probably going to end soon. I talked to Doug, who's the CEO. We parted ways mutually, and then I joined the Solana team.
That's amazing. Tushar and Kyle, obviously, I'm very fond of their writings as well. I think they do a fantastic job of how they articulate kind of the complex things, and admire of what they have done. But very cool to see kind of your path and ultimately how that led you into Solana, and the fact that you and Raj Raj was kind of so supportive of you coming over into the Solana ecosystem. We also work with Raj occasionally, and it's amazing how supportive he is, and just how much he really does behind the scenes. Occasionally he shit posts on Twitter, but he really does a lot for the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah, he's hard driving. If there's somebody that he wants to get, or a project that he wants to get building on Solana, like, he will not stop until he gets that.
Definitely. Well, so maybe kind of transitioning a little bit into the role of what you do on your day-to-day. Maybe backing up, I think 2021 and obviously 2022 were kind of crazy years for Solana, and like a historic rise in terms of price, but also just people's interest in Solana, developers coming into the ecosystem. And then obviously there was the FTX fallout. And one of the unfortunate things about the space is it's a little bit, or can quite be, narrative driven at some times. So maybe from your perspective, in being at the Solana Foundation for some time now. Could you maybe just like recap like the past like year or two in like your words?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot has happened in the last 2 years. When I joined the team, which was September of 2020, well, first off, I joined Solana Labs. I'm now at Solana Foundation, recently transitioned over, but I'll get into that later. So I originally joined the Solana Labs team, and we had a very small BD team. The BD team was me, Raj, and Dom Sang. And at the time, we had 3 ecosystem projects in total on the entire Solana blockchain. And the goal was, how do we get people interested in building here? We think that there's a lot of potential use cases for this blockchain. How do we spread that word and get people to start playing around with this stuff? So the early stages of my role within the Solana ecosystem was helping to stimulate early developer activity. So we would run these virtual hackathons because COVID was still going on. So we couldn't get people in person. So we ran these virtual hackathons. We got people to start playing around with the code. That then like fed this cycle of feedback where people would come and they'd be like, oh, it's really hard to do X. It's really hard to do Y. And then we would see like where someone on the Solana Labs team could slot in to like maybe fix that thing, or someone could build a tutorial, something like that. Slowly but surely, you kind of like built this snowball of better material, better developer environment, better dev tooling. And then we kept running these hackathons, which really kicked the ecosystem off. So the first like 6 to 12 months of my role in the Solana ecosystem was like that, a lot of early ecosystem building.
The hackathons were, I mean, really, in my point of view, like instrumental to a lot of like Solana's bringing in Solana's growth. I remember actually going to the first Solana Breakpoint event in Portugal in 2021, and the Hacker House was separate from the main event. And I think Solana almost did a good job of like keeping all the engineers and like together in one space, because when I talked with a couple of people, some people didn't know like where the engineers were. And I was like, I went to the Hacker House and I met so many amazing engineers building so many amazing things. And then ever since kind of actually hosting like the in-person hackathons, it's really been kind of, I would say, like a shilling point for the entire community to like rally and attend these events. So definitely applaud you and the team for doing those.
Totally. And I will give full credit to Bartosz and Jordan Prince for Hacker House #1. That was like completely unplanned from the first breakpoint. The first breakpoint was supposed to like have everyone totally focused at the breakpoint event. And then Bartosz and Jordan were like, we're going to make a separate venue where we can like kind of rally some developers and like build cool stuff. And it was completely separate. And then like people showed up and they were like, wow, the vibes in here are fantastic. Everyone's building like really cool stuff. I'm just going to stay here. And then we were like, we need to get some of these developers back to the conference. So it was like this, the first breakpoint was really this like culmination of like a year's worth of work. And like finally everyone got to meet in person and like talk about what they were doing and like cross pollinate for the first time. So totally agree that like the virtual hackathons were a really great way to get developers in the door. And then the in-person events are a great way to grow the community, grow that tightness, and really like connect on a human level.
And then, so that, I mean, 2021, that kind of coincided with like the Pico top in terms of just like prices more broadly. And then kind of, we had kind of a change in events. The narrative in the Solana ecos sometimes took a beating from some of the outages. And then like towards the second half of the year, obviously FTX happened. So from a narrative perspective, how have you seen things like change in your point of view? And even like, I would say going into 2023, like it's changed again. And even like extremely like, or at least from what I've observed, the sentiment changing on Twitter in different communities, even with the Electric Capital report being out, kind of highlighting Solana's success in attracting developers. I feel like it's changing again. So could you talk a little bit more on like the narrative for like 2022 and what you're seeing now today?
Sure. So just to juxtapose to like previous narratives, the narrative in 2021 was a lot of excitement. People were really excited about the infrastructure that Solana provided and the possibility of what could be built on Solana. And that kind of coupled with zero interest rate environment and crazy bull market was a lot of hype that eventually culminated around like that breakpoint time, like end of November, early December of 2021. After that, we got so much usage on the Solana platform, which revealed a lot of bugs and a lot of things that people needed to fix. The validator community, core devs, bunch of independent organizations all working together to fix these bugs over the course of 2022. Luckily, a lot of those have been ameliorated right now, and anyone that's going to be left is going to be fixed by the incoming Firedancer client. So 2022 was a full shift to, wait, we got a little too excited about this new tech. We need to kind of like roll it back a second and like, you know, let's figure out where the bugs are and like let's smooth those over to make sure it's reliable as possible. And then end of 2022, obviously we had the FTX blow up, which really was a punch in the face for a lot of people in the industry, and something that none of us had anticipated. And that was really tough. But 2022, while we were like focused on fixing the network and then, you know, kind of washing away the bad actors from the crypto ecosystem, I feel like the second 2023 hit, it was a lot of, okay, this is where we are. These are the problems at hand. Here, let's go. Everyone's excited now. The people who are still here are excited to build these products, and they're going to be here. If they've made it through everything that has happened last year, they're going to be here for the long term, and they're going to focus, work together, and build product that people are excited about. So you saw that kind of kick off at the tail end of 2022 with like the launch of Bonk and like general like vibes increasing in the Solana ecosystem. And then now people are just hyper focused on building product that people want to use. And there's a lot of stuff that is coming in 2023 and beyond that I think is just going to supercharge that.
Definitely. No, it's amazing how quickly things can shift. And unfortunately, I think a lot of it's kind of price based, but no, I would definitely, it's been exciting kind of coming into 2023, even the Solana community, even when kind of backs against the wall in some sense, really rallied together. And I mean, rallied around Bonk, rallied around just having fun, kind of fighting the FUD in a sense. It's been cool to see that community come together. And I mean, really outside of the Ethereum community, in my point of view, the Solana ecosystem really has the strongest community. And so it was cool to see that all those individuals and the people that really love Solana come together and try to fight some of that FUD. On that point, Solana has had kind of a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt thrown its way over the past couple of years. Initially, some of the critiques were kind of like it was the VC chain. I mean, obviously, some of that outages. Some of it I think it's rightly deserved. Some of it I think it's not rightly deserved. Can you talk about how the foundation is really trying to fight some of this unnecessary fear? I mean, you mentioned the engineering team doing a lot of fixes on like the core engineering side. And honestly, Solana's been doing fantastic since a lot of these changes have been implemented. But can you talk about how either the Solana community or the foundation can help like fight some of this misinformation that's out there about the Solana ecosystem?
Yeah, so it's a tall task because the way that our preferred medium of communication and as an industry is Twitter, which a lot can be misconstrued over Twitter. So I think it's a group effort ultimately to make sure that we are disseminating the facts about the Solana network, about what's happening on top of Solana in terms of like what's being built and things like network uptime and reliability. So I think that it really needs to be a group effort moving forward. And I think that that's starting to emerge now, especially talking about that narrative shift that we saw in 2023. You're seeing some like really strong voices start to emerge in the Solana ecosystem. I'm thinking about yourself, Soul Legend, Mert from Helios, everyone who's very determined to make sure that these false narratives don't persist. And unfortunately, like Twitter is a place where things just go viral, and it doesn't matter if that is factual information or not. It becomes the way that people perceive something, especially if they're uninformed about that thing. So it's a combination of making sure that the foundation has all the facts for the community, and that the community and the foundation are good at disseminating those facts to the people who matter. And that's primarily users of the platform and developers and people who are coming to build product on top.
Makes sense. Yeah. And even kind of seeing what the foundation has been putting out in the recent articles. And it's honestly been cool to see some of the independent third parties, such as Electric Capital, put out reports highlighting even the Solana community and how fast that's growing. Maybe quickly, could you touch upon like some of the things that either surprised you from Electric Capital's report, or things that you're like, yes, like the Solana Foundation like ultimately felt this way, but we're able to like kind of quantify?
Yeah, probably the latter. I think that anyone who works within the Solana ecosystem is very aware at like the breadth and depth of the developer ecosystem. And we just haven't been able to put it on paper. We need external parties, both for you can borrow what's the word I'm looking for? Respectability of that brand. So Electric Capital, being an independent VC, is not biased one way or another. So you can have, assurances about the data that they're not skewed towards Ethereum or Solana or Avalanche. So it's very unbiased information. Also, having them do that work to go and dig through GitHub repos and discover all that data and present it properly is something that we need more of, because we all know these facts to be true. But regardless of whether if they come from us, people always assume that there's a caveat attached, like we are skewing it in some way to make us sound better. So the more information that we can have from independent resources about the quality of the Solana ecosystem, the quality of the products being built in the Solana ecosystem, is super important in mending the narrative properly.
Yeah, definitely. And it was cool to see just how quickly Solana was growing the past year. I think in terms of ecosystems with over 1,000 developers, Solana had like a 83% growth year over year, which I thought was extremely impressive.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, to see Solana become the second largest developer ecosystem behind Ethereum from where we were just 2.5 years ago is a monumental feat.
Yeah. No, it's Solana has definitely been stress tested quite a bit. I mean, the fact that it's doing more daily transactions than all EVM chains combined, I think, is not a very well-known fact. But I mean, it's pushed the network to extremes, and unfortunately, sometimes it's kind of failed. But as the kind of learnings from those came about, the Solana network continues to harden and get even better. So it's been definitely cool to watch.
Yes.
So I guess like on a whole, what are you and the foundation really looking forward to in 2023? Now that like 2022 is behind us, it's kind of new narrative. We got a little bit more momentum going in to the year. What things are you excited about for this year?
There are a lot of things that I'm excited about. What I'm going to be spending majority of my time focused on is things in the DeFi sector, as well as just tangential financial use cases like payments and things like that. DeFi in particular was hit the most hard by 2022. You had general risk off from the macro environment. You had Solana network issues. You had a few hacks, and just general liquidity being drained out of the system, which has left it in a maimed position. It's not dead by any means, but in order for DeFi to be the product that is as useful as possible for the end user, liquidity is paramount. So a lot of what I'm focused on in the near term is assisting the DeFi community on how they can be devising new ways for liquidity to come back in, whether that's like new product that is going to be interesting in this current macro environment, how they can have more consumer assurances around their protocol to ensure that, like, if you invest in this protocol, if you put your money in this protocol, you're likely not going to lose your principal. Software is software. There's always going to be bugs. And in the event that there is a bug that causes loss of funds, there needs to be some sort of insurance. So I'm really excited to work with people like the Amulet protocol on Solana, who's doing decentralized insurance, as well as having independent insurance funds within these DeFi protocols that could recapitalize the system in the event that something went wrong. So I'm spending a lot of time there, just really going back to basics. We had like the overhyped 2021 where people kind of like cut corners because it was like a crazy bull market. And now we need to kind of focus back to square one and say, okay, are the design decisions that some of these projects are making the correct ones for the long term? Is this going to drive users into the protocol? If not, how do we course correct and fix that? And the core group that is left here in the DeFi ecosystem is a really sharp bunch of guys and women. And it's fantastic to see and work with them on a regular basis. And I don't have a doubt in my mind that they're going to build product that is 3-4 years from now is going to be some of the top volume applications in all of crypto.
I fully agree. And definitely excited for insurance as well. If we can have that, definitely adds a layer of kind of security that I think everybody would definitely feel a little bit more comfortable with. And I'm also uniquely kind of keen on looking out for applications that are really taking advantage of Solana's high throughput and extremely low latency. I think at the end of the day, lower latency and higher throughput will make for more efficient capital markets. And so that is something Solana uniquely enables, which will be cool to see over time as well.
I totally agree. And I think it's unfortunate that this Serum protocol had such a tight tie to FTX and that the central limit order book sector of DeFi has effectively been reset. It's one of those use cases that you physically cannot build anywhere else on any other live platform today. And once liquidity is rebuilt in that thing, the user experience of a central limit order book is so much better than something like an AMM, where you can have much tighter spreads, larger orders on the book without getting a lot of slippage, as well as transparent order book information. So like plugins with like between what Serum forked into OpenBook. So now OpenBook will be that canonical liquidity point. Mm-hmm. And OpenBook can plug in with things like DFlow, which is basically a payment for order flow protocol. So where you have in traditional financial markets where it's very opaque and the only people who have insight into the order book are people who either like sell their order flow to a trading firm like Robinhood did to Citadel, or people who co-locate and can, sit close to where the orders are being placed to like eke out a small profit on every trade. Whereas like something that you can do on Solana with OpenBook and with something like DFlow is pass order flow through DFlow, have the end user be compensated for that thing, and have it all be a transparent marketplace for order book information. So it's not all being siloed and siphoned off by some large trading firm. Everyone can be properly compensated for the trading that they're doing on these decentralized protocols. So that's some of the stuff that I'm really excited for.
I actually had the DFlow founder on a couple podcasts ago, and we were talking about this exact thing. And nice. It was super exciting just because exactly what you mentioned, just the different possibilities of also the applications like composing together. One other thing that you tweeted that I found fascinating recently was kind of DeFi velocity and kind of tracking a different metric than TVL. I think TVL, in my point of view, is probably not the best metric. And I found this metric much more interesting. Could you share a little bit about how you found it and kind of some of the results from there?
Sure. So I also don't think that TVL is a great metric. I think it's a proxy for capital inefficiency in decentralized protocols. And ultimately it's for lack of a better metric, we haven't been able to figure out a better tracking method for like the usefulness of these protocols. So I was kind of having a conversation with one of my friends about this, and we were talking about how TVL is such a poor metric and how it could be improved upon. And we were messing around with some of the metrics on DeFi Llama, and we were looking at the TVL of Solana, which is currently relatively low, somewhere in the ballpark of like $250 million. And then the volume, which was on par, if not more than the TVL. So we were like, that's interesting. That means that for all of the value that is locked on the Solana blockchain, it's being traded volume wise like 2 times over on a weekly basis or on a daily basis. I forget which time scale I had done the metric on, but we can link it later. And so I just did that comparison for all of the other blockchains, comparing their 24-hour volume and their 7-day volume to the TVL numbers, and realized that Solana had the highest, what was the metric that I called it? Volume per dollar of TVL.
Yep.
Which we called canonically DeFi velocity, because it's very similar to like the velocity of money. So I thought that was interesting because that gives some signal as to the usefulness of the protocol. Definitely. So for Solana, there's so much usefulness in the products that do exist that the money that is sitting in the protocol is changing hands twice over. Whereas some of these other protocols can have large TVL numbers, but their DeFi velocity is like 0.01, which means that for the amount of capital that is in this system, it's not really being utilized. So I thought that was a different way to reframe. And the reason behind like tweeting some of this stuff out is not to be like, oh, look, like, you know, even though TVL is down, like Solana still has a good metric if you skew it this way. The reason is to like stimulate different ways of thinking about this to improve the metrics by which we're measuring health of the DeFi ecosystem, and would love for this to just be a more collaborative process with the broader community to find something that, you know, makes more sense than the TVL metric.
I fully agree. And no, it's appreciate you explaining it, because I found it super insightful just how much or how active really the dollars were in the Solana ecosystem compared to other blockchains. It was just kind of fascinating. So yeah. I'll definitely link that in the show notes.
Cool.
So Solana, I mean, DeFi is a big focus. I think everybody, or I'll speak for myself, I personally was kind of surprised by how large NFTs got in the blockchain ecosystem more broadly in 2021. And I think Solana just uniquely, because of it being a large single shard, very cheap, NFTs naturally kind of proliferated in the ecosystem. And then the DeFi scene kind of simultaneously popped up. What, I guess, so DeFi and NFTs were kind of a large factor. And the other kind of bucket that when I talk with other investors in the ecosystem, they also are like very curious about gaming. So I was curious if you could talk about how the Solana Foundation is trying to either support or involve like game developers in the Solana ecosystem.
Yeah, so within the Solana Foundation BD team, we have 5 particular verticals that we focus on primarily. DeFi, NFTs, which we also kind of call like media entertainment, games, payments and commerce, and then DAOs. So the team that is focused primarily on games, we've probably met Colleen, Matt Sorg, Johnny Lee, Tiffany. They focus primarily on working with AAA game studios. Johnny comes from the industry, and they talk to a lot of these gaming studios as well as like grassroots games developers who come to the Solana ecosystem. And basically the goal is to not sell them on the Solana blockchain, but show them, hey, if you are interested in building a Web3 game application, Solana is the only place for that. This is the only place where you're going to be able to build a game that has a good user experience, that is not prohibitively expensive, like some of these other blockchains where you have, 15 plus second block times and fees that could be variable from $1 to $100 based on the demand of the network. So in that respect, Solana has been a first mover in that. And that's ultimately what we intended to do with Solana as a platform was we never wanted to acquire existing IP or acquire existing products from a small pie of existing protocols on like Ethereum or other blockchains. We wanted to create infrastructure that allowed for new opportunity, which is exactly what the games ecosystem is. So we've seen a ton of demand in games. The problem that you haven't seen a lot of them launch is because quality games take there's a long time to build. There's a lot of development lead time. So luckily, a lot of the ones that the games team has been working with over the last year, 2 years are coming to market this first half of 2023. So there's going to be about 30 games launching on mainnet Solana before June of this year. So a lot of people are going to be able to try all those out very shortly.
And even prior to this past year, Solana Breakpoint, Solana had a games day in Portugal, and it was amazing just to walk around and talk with all the different teams. I was personally shocked how many engineers and builders were there. It was cool to see.
Games Day was awesome. That was one where the games team like organized that entirely, and the rest of the BD team kind of just showed up, and we were like awestruck at how awesome that event was. There were so many games, all playable, right there for you to just jump in, go up to a screen, talk to the team, and hear about their game that they're building. And that was the first time that I feel like a lot of people in the Solana ecosystem felt that games were like really tangible. It was like, wow, these are like some really quality games that are imminently coming to the Solana blockchain. And it made it real for the first time.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of energy, and I mean, you could just feel it walking around. So it was cool. So you mentioned kind of those 5 sectors that the Solana team or Solana Foundation is ultimately focused on. One kind of critique more broadly that I hear of Solana, and I would say just like of other ecosystems as well, is they don't do enough from like the BD support side. And the one name that continuously comes up as doing like a good job is Polygon. Could you talk about kind of, and more broadly, the Solana Foundation's approach to BD and kind of, how the team approaches it versus like these other ecosystems?
Yeah, so the way that we approach the BD in the Solana ecosystem is we are a facilitator of the ecosystem. We mostly don't drive specific initiatives. We provide the infrastructure and all the tools that people need to build certain things. And then the onus is entirely on them to go and build those things. Can the Solana Foundation provide help in that capacity, whether it be technical help or, connections to exchanges or investors or things like that? Yeah, absolutely. But when it comes to actually building the product, acquiring users and building something that people really want to use, that onus is entirely on the project themselves. So we have gotten some flack in the past, and some people might disagree with that perspective. But ultimately, if you're building a company, regardless of whether it's in Web3 or not, like whether the company succeeds or fails at the end of the day is on you. It should not be on your investors for not giving you enough advice, or your family who gave you some startup money. And so while that may be harsh for some people, that is the approach that we take to building in the Solana ecosystem. And at the same time, we're not in the business of deploying large sums of capital to acquire builders. We think that people should be coming to the Solana ecosystem because it is the right infrastructure for whatever project you are trying to build, not because we've paid you to come here.
Yeah. And I think like that's been kind of the payment for projects to move is not kind of unheard of. And I would say kind of in even Web 2, that practice happens all the time. I think in Web 3, the hard part is it's not always totally transparent. And so there's just a lot of rumors, and I mean, it does happen, but it's not always on surface level easy to understand why a project may move from one ecosystem to another. And often or occasionally payments do happen. So definitely appreciate the clarity there.
If there's one thing that I can impart on you and the listeners, it's that when the market takes as severe of a downturn as it just did, and people are suddenly jumping ship to different platforms, it's likely not because they had the realization that the current tech stack that they were working on is not the one, and that this one over here is the one that we should be going to. It's likely for ulterior motives.
Yeah. We'll leave it there. So a couple larger initiatives that the Solana Foundation is really kind of pushing towards in 2023 and 2024 is SMS and Saga, and then also Firedancer and the second client being built there. Could you talk a little bit about each of those and the Solana Foundation's excitement for those projects?
Sure. So Firedancer in particular is super exciting from a network reliability and scalability standpoint. So essentially what the subsidiary, the Firedancer team subsidiary of Jump, is working on right now is basically picking apart the existing Solana core client, breaking it into segments, optimizing that segment, and then moving on to the next segment, to basically at the end have an entirely different validator client that is optimized for on the order of 1 million transactions per second and designed to be more reliable than the existing client. So the thing that is super exciting, there's multiple things that are exciting about that. One is the scalability improvements, theoretically, of the Firedancer client will be fantastic. Two, on network reliability, if you have people running the Solana core client, you have people running the Jito client, you have people running the Firedancer client, that creates redundancy within the Solana network. So the reason why the network had gone down previously is because everyone is running one singular client. And if there's a bug in one client, there's a bug in everybody's node. So when you have people running different validator clients, that removes the single point of failure. So over time, it should make the Solana network much more reliable than we've seen in the past, and people can have more assurances over network uptime. As for,
I mean, and maybe just touching upon that point really quickly. I mean, numerous times I think Ethereum has been saved for having multiple clients, and unfortunately, I mean, with any new ecosystem, it's very hard, at least from the beginning, to start kind of parallel tracks on multiple different clients. And I think Ethereum is one of the few that has multiple clients. I'm actually not sure of other blockchains that do.
Ethereum is actually the only one that has multiple clients.
Yeah. And then, so it's exciting now that Solana will be in this family and have the additional robustness of kind of the uptime and reliability. But then as you mentioned, the additional benefits of performance. And this is actually one thing that I really want the Solana community to do better on, is kind of sharing the awesome things that are going on with Jump and the Firedancer team, because it's really, from a technical standpoint, an amazing feat of engineering about what they're building. And the performance benefits are just going to be amazing. And so I am a little envious in the sense of how good the Ethereum community is at kind of propagating and even sharing their story about different EIPs. And I think the Solana community can do better. And Jump and the Firedancer team and what they're building is really something that will be amazing for the entire blockchain industry.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just side note, we had an in-person meeting recently with a few of the BD team and a consulting agency. We actually got this comment that they said, I've met you guys now, and I've also met Anatoly previously, and I got to say that you guys are some of the most humble people in crypto. And we were like, wow, that's a great comment. And he was like, but you guys need to turn the humble down from like an 8 to like a 5 and start talking about how awesome you guys are.
I agree.
It's like, that's a great piece of feedback. And we will definitely take that to heart and start, while these are like, for example, Firedancer is not launched yet, so it's very hard to count your eggs before what's the term?
I don't know. Everybody talks about EIPs before they're before they happen. So
exactly.
If we can get the community rally around in this, I think it would be a good thing.
I totally agree. I think we're ready to turn the humble dial down a little bit and start talking about these awesome improvements.
Cool. No, I'm extremely excited for Firedancer. I think I can make a compelling argument that it's probably the most interesting thing going on in crypto today. And so would definitely love to hear more from the community and the Solana Foundation on kind of sharing the exciting stuff that that team's doing. And then on the SMS front and Saga, I think this is also, Solana is the only blockchain that's really pushing into the mobile phone devices, and really out of necessity, I would argue, just because the industry has kind of been handicapped from Apple and Android devices and not really being allowed to go fully Web3 or crypto native. Can you talk about the progress that the team has been made there?
Sure. So the Solana mobile team is a subsidiary of Solana Labs, basically an entirely separate org for the most part from Foundation, who's specifically dedicated to launching the phone along with Awesome, OSOM, who is the hardware provider of the phone. So the Solana mobile team right now is in the beta testing phase. The phone exists. I have one right here. And it is being distributed out to developers and beta testers to basically iron out the last few bugs before the public launch. So the goal of the phone, for those who don't know, is the phone has a hardware security module in it, which is effectively like a hardware wallet that is biometrically secured by your fingerprint. So when you go into the phone, you basically have a hardware wallet in your phone, but it also is able to utilize SMS, which is the Solana mobile stack. Which is basically a software within the phone to make it easier to use Web3 applications. So I can find it and we can put it in the show notes, but I tweeted out my flow of doing an Orca trade a couple months ago, and it's so seamless. You go to Orca's website, you click Connect Wallet, it automatically pans over to your wallet page. You authenticate it with your finger, goes back, you make the trade, it asks you to sign, authenticate with your finger one more time, and then the transaction goes through. It's a super smooth experience, and it's the first time that I think that type of user experience has been done on mobile, because ultimately, like, crypto on mobile until this point is like a super clunky experience and something that is like inherently insecure. So super excited about generally just new use cases that this is going to give rise to. And in the same way that when the internet went from desktop to mobile, you're going to have new user behaviors that are going to inform new product. And that's really what I'm like most excited about. Ultimately, if the Solana phone and SMS are not competitive with iOS and the iPhone, that's fine. But if it stimulates this groundswell of, hey, we should be thinking about how we make better crypto mobile experiences, then I think ultimately this is an investment well made.
I definitely agree. I mean, and the fact that Web3 and kind of the blockchain industry as a whole has not been treated as a first-class citizen on mobile devices really saddens me, just because the majority of people globally really interact with the internet through a smartphone. And so by unlocking this and kind of making it a first-class citizen, making it extremely secure, it's going to be exciting to watch. And as you mentioned, really the different usage that developers come up with and kind of the new habits that users learn from the device, I think will be very interesting. And I'm also curious to see over the long term how this ultimately affects Apple and generally the Android ecosystem, to see if they'll kind of follow suit.
Yeah, I hope so, because ultimately they're going to need to tip at some point should these mobile crypto applications reach the scale that we want them to reach. But in the short term, it's going to be like a super exciting development sandbox where you're going to see all these new products. Like, I mean, you're already seeing it right now with like the launch of like Dialect on mobile and like what that experience looks like, and sending Solana Pay transactions like a Venmo through Dialect. So that's really cool. And to have that on like a crypto enabled phone, like the Saga, is going to be super exciting.
I definitely agree. I'm excited to watch it. And I did a podcast with Steven, who is on the Saga and SMS team. So I'll link that as well. Maybe for the last like 10 minutes or so, I asked Twitter some questions that they would have for you. And so maybe just kind of riffing on some of the high level questions. One being like, how hungry and ambitious is the Solana Foundation for general market share? Do you think it's time to start attracting and retaining users rather than just like solely developers?
That's a good question. I think that now is not the time to be specifically retaining users. I think there's still so much infrastructure that needs to be built that the time to retain users is somewhere 12 to 24 months down the line. And once we've reached a point of reliability for the ecosystem generally and enough products where people are coming back repetitively to use, that is the time to retain users. I think that we're still in the phase of crypto where there's a lot of pie to grow rather than fight over the existing pie. So rather than fight over the existing few million users in all of Web3, I think that the goal for us should be to grow that pie in the near term, and then should it stagnate in the future, then focus on user retention.
I definitely agree. I think people would be shocked and are shocked when they actually see the raw numbers of how few users, not in Solana, but in the crypto ecosystem in general. It's a much different number than like people that like hold crypto, but the people that actually sign transactions on the network and interact with dApps is only in the couple millions at most. And so I'm shocked when I look at these numbers, even on Ethereum with OpenSea and Uniswap. I think they have less than 5 million addresses ever interacted with their smart contracts. So it's early.
Yes, definitely early.
And then what's another good question from here? This is maybe an interesting one. How do you explain the vision of Solana to, say, like someone that is in high school or wanting to learn more about like the Solana ecosystem? Explain to me like I'm 5, I guess is the question.
Yeah. So the juxtaposition that I make is just, I try to make comparisons. Crypto's so hard for like ELI 5s because there is prerequisite knowledge that you need to know for me to be able to explain the graduation of Ethereum architecture to Solana architecture. But that's usually what I would draw it to. Like, imagine you have a very clunky architecture on Ethereum and it is not properly enabled for certain use cases and also like large amounts of concurrent users. And the reason why Solana exists and the reason why this architecture has been built is to try and graduate away from that architecture and focus on acquiring more and more users who can all use this platform without a degraded user experience. So that wouldn't necessarily make sense to a 5-year-old, but that is my best shot.
That is true. I don't know if I could do it for a 5-year-old. Maybe I could do it to like a teenager or a high schooler. I try to explain it as, I mean, this is not the perfect analogy, but I think like semi-directionally it's correct. Is like early days of the internet, you had dial-up and then you got broadband and then fiber optics. And each time you made one of those jumps, engineers had a much bigger sandbox to play in and you could build more interesting applications. And similar to crypto, kind of in terms of block space, I see Bitcoin kind of being the first iteration with like relatively, I mean, decently sized blocks, a couple megabytes, but relatively low latency with like 10-minute block times. And then you get Bitcoin have 12-second or 13-second block times, but not very much data. And then you kind of graduate to like the high throughput blockchains like Solana, where you have extremely low latencies in terms of block times and bigger blocks that allow engineers to do more interesting things.
Yeah. If anyone wants to refer to something in writing about what Logan just said, the frictionless blog is where you should go, and you should definitely link that post in the show notes, because that's a fantastic explanation.
Thank you. We're trying to write more and help fight the FUD, because it is hard. And you kind of answered one of these questions earlier, but is there anything like specifically that the Solana Foundation, and you also mentioned kind of being less humble, like in this coming year, to kind of like fight the FUD? But are there any like specific things that you would recommend to the community or the Solana Foundation to do to kind of fight the FUD for this year and going forward?
No, I think, I mean, the humble piece is definitely something that we're all going to collectively try and focus on. I think that we have done some pretty impressive stuff collectively as an ecosystem, and the time is not now is not the time to be quiet. Now is the time to be very loud about it, especially when crypto is being very criticized publicly all over the place. The time to be loud is now. So I think that follow along with the Solana Foundation blogs, the newsletter, and as well as like the Solana Foundation team, so you can get up-to-date information. And to the extent that you don't understand something, ask questions. Like, all of our DMs are open. We're always happy to talk. And I think that collectively, as long as we all have aligned voices and everyone coherently understands where Solana is today, why it's exciting, and where it's going, then we'll have no problem defeating FUD and untruthful information.
I agree. Good points. And then maybe for last like 5 minutes or so, I mean, obviously you're very focused on DeFi. There's some big things coming up with SMS and Firedancer, but are there anything that you're like particularly excited about? Maybe kind of touching upon the DeFi again, or just your thoughts about what you want to see happen.
Yeah, so it's something that I've been like really excited about, like in the last couple months, is people collectively think that the killer app of crypto thus far, outside of like something like Bitcoin or something like that, like a reserve currency money, is stablecoins. No intermediary, global rails, 24/7 and almost instantaneous settlement on Solana. You have a self-sustaining payment rail that is being underutilized right now because people don't have access to this payment rail in like intuitive ways. So kind of coupled with this like mobile push and the saga, I'm really excited for the opportunity to kind of like fix the cold start problem for crypto payments. The problems that exist today is, one, a lot of consumers don't have crypto on their phone, and two, it's insecure to hold crypto on your phone if they do have it. So if you have a lot of people with Saga devices or similar devices where they're comfortable holding crypto on their phone, and you also have something like a Solana Pay where it's very easy for a merchant to kind of integrate with this thing to provide that at a point of sale system, suddenly you have a payments network where people are coming into your store with USDC and they could pay via Solana Pay, which is instantaneously settled. There's no credit card fees. And you get like all of the benefits of this global network, as well as the decentralized applications from that ecosystem, should you want them. So I think that having consumers hold crypto on their phones and then merchants be receiving crypto payments stimulates this new environment of crypto payments that has generally been underexplored. And I think that could really be a huge use case. And once you have that, there's more demand for crypto payments. Then I feel like that liquidity just generally grows and grows. And ultimately, obviously, some people are going to convert back to fiat for fiat denominated costs. But a lot of people are going to keep a lot of their money in crypto and then figure out other opportunities to do with that capital that they have. So pretty excited about that.
Yeah. Solana Pay, and just, I mean, being able to send payments on Solana in like USDC or a stable coin, it actually, it's really remarkable. I mean, much better than a wire transfer where you're getting paid, where you pay upwards of $25 plus, and then instant settlement. It's for fractions of a penny. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Cool. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Ben. Really applaud what you and the Solana team have been doing. Appreciate the engineers that have been doing all the upgrades to the network, and appreciate the foundation kind of fighting the FUD. And putting out a lot of fires that kind of come your way. So yeah, thank you again, and appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.